Hello, slingers. Welcome back to another Wordslinger podcast. I hope you're ready for another Wordslinger episode. I can't wait to get into this one. So I'm not going to keep you any longer. Let's get to it. I'll see you on the other side.
It's the Wordslinger podcast, where story matters. Build your brand, write your book, redefine who you are. It's all about the story here. What's yours? Now, here's the guy who invented pants optional, Kevin Tumlinson, the Wordslinger.
Wordslinger.
Well, I am J. Kevin Tumlinson, the Wordslinger, author, podcaster, public speaker. Those are all the things I end up putting on my my LinkedIn profile, my resume. So I am looking forward to this chat. This is one of those, and I kind of open with this when I introduced the guest in the interview, but Julie Fingersh was a fun conversation to have because she and I just kind of clicked immediately. I love when that happens. I love when I have a guest on and there's an immediate connection. You could talk about anything. You could talk all day. You're almost sad that the interview is only going to be like 30 to 45 minutes long. But this was a fun one. Julie, she's a writer, a journalist, and we kind of range all over the place. And we talk a lot about family, which this is the time of year, right? When talking about family is kind of on the table. Everyone's family is a drama. A lot of people's families are a tragedy. Most people's families are some form of comedy, and there's a fine line between comedy and tragedy, right? And we get to see that line, dance on that line, cross back and forth over that line quite a bit during the holidays. So, but I can't wait for you to hear this interview. Stick around afterwards. You'll hear the note at the end, and I'm sure to have something really interesting to say. I hope. I'm just going to talk off the cuff, so we'll see. But we'll see you on the other side, and I hope you enjoy this interview with Julie Fingersh. This is one of those conversations. I'm just going to put it right out there out front because we've already been talking for like a good, 12 minutes or so. I don't know how long we've been talking. And I think, like I said before we started, Julie, that I think we wasted all our good material before the conversation. So
no. Now it's no end. Kevin, as you know, since you do a podcast about stories, the story never ends.
The story never ends. That's the best part about stories. Especially the human story. I'm talking to Julie Fingersh, who's the author of Stay, A Story of Family, Love, and Other Traumas. The first two by themselves are the biggest traumas in my life. Family and love are where all my traumas are born. Especially family.
Yeah, I think you're not alone.
So what's the inspiration here? What's the...
Yeah, so wait, first of all, I just have to say that... when I tell people that's the name, it's like, I'm not saying it's a litmus test, but it's a little bit of a litmus test because there are the people who take it literally and they're like, oh, okay. And then there are people who sort of chuckle at like the sad irony of that because theoretically, love and family are supposed to just be, hearts and roses and rainbows. And and anybody who has either knows that they also are traumatic. So anyway.
I mean, have you ever met anybody whose family story wasn't complicated? Do you know anyone who can say that?
I don't think there's anyone who's telling the truth.
Yeah.
Whose stories are not. I think the road meets the whatever that cliche is. What is that cliche?
Rubber meets the road.
Yeah,
that's it.
That's just like, are you lying or are you telling the truth? Because literally, I think we all know, especially at our age, that there is no such thing as family without complication. And if you're lucky, it's grounded in love, so you can get through it, as my family has.
Yeah.
But okay, the inspiration for the story. All right. Well, it's a memoir. And most memoirs begin with like a breakdown of the author, a
Yeah.
mental break. Mostly it's people are like, you write a memoir to like get out of your personal hell.
Yeah.
And then that's why it has such a bad name, author, like memoir, because people are like, no offense, but if you're not, Michelle Obama or Celine Dion, who cares
Right.
about you? So for me, I'm kind of an accidental author. I never intended to write a book, but so inspired is probably not the right word. I think it was for me, I was um, like compelled
Yeah.
to start writing about what was going on for me at this time in my life, which was um, our daughter was leaving. She was a senior in high school and our son was a few years behind her. So I was staring down the barrel of the empty nest
Yeah.
after having left my career for 3 decades as a writer. And as at that point, when I first left, I was a nonprofit, I was an executive director of a community organization. And so there was the part that many of my friends and I were feeling of just the pure grief of like, oh my God, our kids are leaving home and how is that going to work?
Yeah.
Because as a family, you like build, whether you have kids or not, whether you have pets or whatever your little world is, you've built a civilization. And when your world includes children and then they leave, it's like it's sort of like the civilization like kind of explodes or
Right.
implodes or collapses on some level.
Collapses. You're right.
And
Yeah.
you're kind of like, now what? So there was that, which was sort of basic, that most people who have kids who are leaving are going through. But for me, there's this other crazy thing that happened where my daughter was just really, she had always soared through life and she was like at the pinnacle. And I was sort of like so proud of her and so excited for her. And then this horrendous thing happened where I suddenly had feelings of envy for my own daughter, which is
Oh,
something, just so you know,
yeah.
parents are not supposed to be jealous of their children. We're allowed to be like so many things, but definitely like not envy.
Yeah.
And that was so traumatic for me because I love my daughter so much and it was just it was such a dystonic feeling to have that I knew something was wrong, like
Yeah.
really, really wrong. And so I needed to kind of figure that out. And I needed to figure out why I had dropped writing for 30 years, which I never
Hmm.
really understood.
Right.
And so I won't go into the whole thing, but the arc of the story is basically my 50th year, which is okay, you may not know because you're looking younger than me, but you're right in time for the cliched midlife crisis. So I was
Yes.
like all on track for that. However, it was also this other much deeper thing, which it did end up being.
Yeah.
Um, and so I was sort of starting to think like I've got to get back to writing. And then did start to do that. And then my daughter had this thing happen in her life, which started bringing back for me a flooding of all the memories of my childhood. And so basically, the inspiration, Kevin, was family, love, and other traumas. And that's sort of what happens in our life, which is, in short, our past catches up with us.
Yeah.
And we have this sort of invisible blueprint in our lives of our childhoods, of our siblinghood, of all that stuff. And at a certain point, if you live long enough, it comes back to roost. And so it was the for me originally it was just trying to write my way through and understand what had happened in my life and why it had turned out the way it did. And then real time stuff started happening, which sort of presented itself to be
Yeah.
written.
I I feel like that idea of feeling a bit of jealousy toward your kid though. like I think that's to me that seems like that would be fairly natural because especially when you because like I just turned 52 like 2 weeks ago. I'm in that stage where I feel like I'm re-examining my life and not looking at it favorably because I'm like I didn't accomplish some of the things I meant to accomplish. So if I
Exactly.
had a kid who came along and maybe they're starting fresh,
Right.
getting all these new opportunities, I could see
Yes.
feeling jealousy.
I love that you say that. And I want to say that I think that you might be feeling free to say that because you don't have your own kids.
Yeah,
But I want to tell you that if you survey parents,
yeah,
you are not going to get people to tell you that they are jealous of their kids. And
right.
I think that I want to can I just jump in and read a paragraph from my
Yeah.
beginning, which
Oh
sort
yeah.
of like really sums up. It's okay. So you know about story since you've been
Yeah.
doing a podcast about it. So you know how you're supposed to have like an inciting incident in a
Hmm.
story.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
usually an inciting incident do you think all of your listeners know what that is?
Oh yeah. They're gonna know. Yeah.
Yeah, they're gonna know. So
Yeah.
okay, so the thing about a memoir is like, I mean, a lot of times this stuff is your inner life, which honestly,
Yeah.
if you're not a celebrity, who cares? So I'm going to read you, and I think this was my inciting incident, which people may or may not relate to. But I bet if you're a parent, whether you admit it or not, you're gonna relate. So the setup is I was cooking a pot of chicken soup, and my daughter came in, and she said that she had just gotten off the phone with the Secret Service. And I was like, the Secret Service? Secret Service? And she's like, yeah. And so, long story short, she had been asked to drive in Hillary Clinton's motorcade. She was like the intern to.
Wow.
Okay, so I feel like your listeners are probably like already like Julie's a horrible person. She's jealous of her child. But what you need to know is that like I cannot like love my child. My children are like the center of my life. So
Right.
anyway, this is what happened. So um torture, along with heartbursting joy, is par for the course with parenting. But an unholy clashing of the two had nearly blown me off my feet when a few days later before that, Jessie had walked into the kitchen, tossed her wallet right onto my pile of sliced red onions, and announced that she'd just gotten off the phone with the Secret Service. I cocked my head. Okay, wait, like the Secret Service, Secret Service? Okay, goes on and on and on. Yes, the Secret Service, Secret Service. I shook my head and smiled. She was of course, she was the one who was chosen. She was a treasure of a human being, and her spirit radiated in every part of her life. I looked at my beautiful girl, shining and proud, and that's when it happened, when the verdict came down about what a terrible mother I was. As I looked into Jessie's face, that time in my life, so filled with clarity and ambition, exactly like hers was now, rose to my mind like a ghostly mirage. The mirage then horribly turned into a wave of envy that swept through me like a dirty tide. And right under its crest, like a black ocean at the bottom of my consciousness, churned a quiet, aching grief. It was a grief steeped in shame, shame about how my own young promise, year by year, had slowly and inexplicably drained away. I had done this much to myself. I had done this to myself, that much I knew, and now it was coming back to roost. And
Mm.
so I read that to you because I think with story in books, it's you in order for it to work, especially as a true story, especially when you're not a celebrity, like you got to be ready to tell like the hideous truth.
Yeah.
And at that time, I was sort of like, when that happened to me, I was like, this is a horrible thing. And am I going to be honest about it? And what I found was writing through it, I sort of unearthed so much about trauma and love and family and identity. And and
Yeah.
all that. And
That
I
w-
don't know if that relates to you and like that feeling of like unleveraged potential, at this time
yeah.
in
Oh,
your life.
yeah.
That's a
Yeah.
thing in midlife. I mean, that's what,
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I see these, because I talk to a lot of authors at every stage of this career. And, I'll occasionally come across this, this, I'll just say it. I mean, this
yeah,
kid who comes
yeah,
in, and
right.
they wrote their first book and they got like a plug from Stephen King on the cover and
Yeah,
they're,
yeah,
they're crushing it. And, here I'm like, God, it took me, God, I mean, I was probably in my 40s before I really saw a hit of any kind, you know. And
yeah,
I'm
yeah.
nowhere near where I think I should be as an author, So I
See,
think, yeah,
and don't you think that that is a story that's shared by, I
yeah,
don't even care, because that kid, have him back in 10 years, and I guarantee you he's going to be complaining to you because the
yeah,
next kid was farther ahead than him.
yeah,
And that's just such a human instinct. I think it's in our DNA to be, questioning ourselves and thinking we're supposed to be somewhere that we're not.
yeah. So was it how long after that your daughter came in and said she was called by the Secret Service? I mean, how long after that was it before you processed this and put it on the page?
On the page. So this was, I'm not, I'm not like a woo-woo person.
Yeah.
I don't really I mean, or I guess I should say I didn't really believe in like signs and all that sort of stuff. Um, but the reason, look at my beautiful book cover, see the dragonfly on there?
Yeah. I want to
Um,
ask about the dragonfly too, but that's
okay,
next.
I want you to ask me about it, but I'm probably not
Also
going to
about
talk
the
about it.
post-its.
Oh, well, that would take, need some meds for that. Um, so, but the dragonfly, which I'll tell you about later, is it symbolizes how things work,
Okay.
and that I was a non-believer in all that stuff. And so what happened right after that conversation is I went on a run with my friend, and I confessed to her this deep dark secret of mine that like
Mm,
don't tell anyone, but I'm a horrible mother. Like I know it looks like I'm amazing, but it turns out I'm a sociopath. And she was like, "Have you written about it?" And I was like, "Well, no, Lucy, why would I write about it when I haven't written in like 30 years?" And she's
yeah.
like, "Well, maybe, or when I haven't written at all because I'm a blocked writer." And she's like, "Well, maybe you need to try to do that." And then I was like, "Well, that's not going to happen." And then I came home and I opened my laptop, and there was a message from this woman I didn't know, Laura Munson in Montana, who was offering a writer's retreat, saying,
Mm,
like, find your writing voice. And I was like, where's the music? That's
right.
just too weird.
Right.
And that, so I ended up going on this writer's retreat. It's the first time I put pen to paper for in that kind of way, as it like before I left my writing career, I was in my 20s in New York, and I had written for, Business Week, and I had national buy. Like I was totally like on the trajectory. I was like one of those people you're talking about. And
Yeah.
then it just all went away, and I never really understood why, but it just did.
Yeah.
And that's when it started. And that was in 2016. And then I was telling you, it took like kind of 6 years of binge writing. I kind of wrote the book once every few months. I would escape for a few days, and I'd write 50 pages and then go back to my life, and that back and forth, back and forth. And then it took another 2 years to find an agent and get the book deal and the whole thing. And yeah, so that was 8 years.
Yeah. Yeah. That's
But it was kind of
that's
torture.
that's yeah, that's lengthy therapy right there.
You know what, though? This is what's horrible. And I know you've interviewed so many authors, so I'm going to guess, unless they're like super well established, the horrible thing is you hear this so often that it takes so maybe not so long to write it, but so long to go through the whole miserable process. But on the other hand, Kevin, I am proof it's never too late,
That's right.
right?
That's right.
Because
Yeah.
as we bragged about, Anne Lamott gave me a blurb. So,
I
and that
was
was
going
out.
to mention it. I was going to mention it because
I was just had to get right there and just say that, not to brag, but a little to brag, but more to say anything's possible when
I
you deal
assume
with your stuff.
you've read Bird by Bird.
Did it help me? No.
But it
You
does,
know,
it's inspiring though. Yeah. I don't
no,
see it as it's not like a craft book or anything. So, I mean,
no, it was amazing. It was a life-changing book. I'm totally kidding. Like I love her,
yeah,
and every book she writes inspires you because it shows you how to
yeah,
dive in and do the shitty first drafts and
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. I have to tell you, by the way, that and I've had another guest on the show recently about memoir. And
Hmm.
she has a school to, she has a little program to teach people to write memoir. But I
Right.
have this love for memoir because
You
I don't know
do?
why. I do. I know I'm weird. Like I don't
No,
write
no,
memoir.
no, because it's what you're saying is you like real life and people who tell the truth. Why
I
is it?
do. Yeah.
Isn't that sad that that's what gets the bad name? It's
Yeah, I
just
know.
because,
Yeah.
it's just, I think it gets the bad name because it feels so self-indulgent. Okay,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, my dog is,
No, I'm watching her. I'm loving the dog. What's her name?
her name
Or
is
his
Scarlett.
name?
And she is, and she's in the book, and hopefully she's not choking to death. But um, the thing about memoir is you got to make it so that it's universal or
Yeah.
it is self. So
Yeah.
that's why it took 6 years.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's probably a piece of that in like the reason I do the podcasting stuff because
Tell me
I want to get the story, right? I want to hear
the
how did you get
backstory.
here? Yeah, exactly. The story behind the storyteller, like we said before we started recording. That's the whole point for me. So what you've done other writing, you were a journalist, you've done a lot of writing for some well-known publications. How was this different? Like what was the mindset shift that had to happen between that kind of writing and writing the memoir?
Yeah. Um, so it's so weird how this is so about story too. It's so weird how things unfold because I didn't go back to journalism until I started writing the book.
Hmm.
And the only reason I really did was because if you, I know because you go to writing conferences, you go to the writing conference and they're like, oh, hey, PS, unless you have a huge author platform and
Yeah,
have like 10,000 followers and have bylines and blah, blah, blah. Really nice you're writing the book, but that book is never going to see the light of day
right.
unless you pay for every cent of it. And so it kind of gave me the push to go back to journalism.
Hmm.
And but I hadn't had like a national byline since I was in my 20s. And that kind of writing is so different because it's short form,
Yeah.
it's deadline driven. It's like my stories back were personal essays, which is kind of mostly what I do, what that's kind of like what I like to do most.
Yeah.
Uh, and it's so different. The whole like ecosystem, first of all, the publishing industry in journalism is I mean, the journalism world is
Hmm.
so completely different because it's like has a very short life and then it's out there and you've already sold the story, so it's coming out. And then you go on to the next thing.
Yeah.
Um, this it was 248 pages, and I'm just telling you, I mean, for me, the biggest thing was I was like, the first 2 years when people are like, oh, so you're getting back to writing, like, how's that going? I'm like, yeah, I don't know, we'll see how it goes. And like, oh, what are you writing? Like, oh, I don't know. It's like, let's not talk about it. So for 2 years, like, I wouldn't even say it was a memoir because first of all, a memoir is like embarrassing and has a terrible name,
Oh,
being
that's
self-indulgent
unfortunate.
and like, well, because people are like, oh, you're writing an autobiography about your life. And then you
Yeah.
have to be like, yeah, I know I'm not that interesting, but, and then you have to be like, well, it's not really about myself. It's kind of about humanity, but like it's kind of about my family, but it's how it relates to your family. It's very, and but what I found the big difference is the structure, the craft, it's a
Yeah.
whole different thing. And which I really needed to learn, which I
Yeah.
did learn through working, going to the retreat, having teachers. I had an amazing developmental editor, Brooke Warner, who really helped me. The story weaves together my brother's story, my story, and my daughter's,
Yeah.
and it goes from past to present. And so it's a real it was a real challenge, like kind of craft wise. And so that's just a whole different thing. Boy, book
Yeah.
writing's a whole thing, and then there's the publishing, which is its own specific hell.
Which is,
But
yeah, it's like
yeah,
dancing among Vikings wielding hammers. It's chaotic and crazy and painful.
yes. With, with, by the way, no guarantees, and you're like forging ahead, and really truthfully, like no one really cares if you do it or don't do it. Like nobody really
Right.
cares. So it's like you have to care enough about your project, which is its own personal, like psychological thing, right? To
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
care enough about your own story to actually get it done. That
Yeah.
was hard.
And that's a huge thing. I mean, I've worked in journalism and, I've worked newspapers and TV and radio and like
Right.
there's deadlines, there's editors, there's all these, there's a whole system in place to make sure that that story gets written and told, right? And then sitting down to write a novel or to write a memoir or to write any long format thing, like you don't have that system. So what did you have to do to make sure you can kind of kept finding those weekends and stuff and coming back to it?
Yeah. No, such a good point. And for me, what I found, the only I have no doubt that I would not have been able to cross the finish line, as they say,
Yeah.
exhausting. Um, if I had not had a writing community.
Mm,
Like there's no way.
right.
And so, for decades, I had this private conversation with myself being like, why am I not writing? Like
Yeah.
what happened? What's the deal? Like I thought I was going to be, Anna Quinlan, and now I'm like on the PTA, and what happened?
Yeah.
And like none of that happened. And I think that to me, what got me to actually connect with the writer inside of me, which had always been there, but had like did not have the like confidence, the staying power to like come out and really stay out,
Hmm.
was all the difference was going to, first of all, being, and this is a privileged thing, to leave my life for a few days and go dedicate myself and be in a community of writers that sort of like to just remember that I could write again, like without pressure, without deadlines. It was just like, do you have something to say? I mean, at the time for me, I did, because I was like, I need to figure out what is just how, like, what's the deal?
Yeah.
What's going on in my psychology that is just so completely polar opposite of the way I see myself. But then from that, I was very lucky and really gelled with the some of the people in my group, and we started a writing group. And we have been together for since 2016, all
Mm,
working on our own books. And once a month we meet on Zoom for a couple hours, we workshop each other's stuff. For the first few years we would actually like have retreats, rotated houses to go and spend a few days like workshopping the 30 pages, successively of our
yeah.
books.
Yeah.
And it was like too much time, too much money. And so it went down to once a year. And I know full well not everyone can do that. But I think in this day and age, there are so many opportunities to
Yeah.
connect in writers' communities. And I just think that's for me, and for kind of for most people I know, that is the difference between staying with it and not staying with it.
Yeah. Yeah. Maybe it's too expensive or too cumbersome to do exactly what you did, but there's so many ways to, I mean, I know so many authors who have like Facebook groups or just
Exactly.
text message threads, I mean, there's there's a crazy number of ways to
No,
connect with a
exactly.
community.
Exactly. And at the end of the day, it's about accountability.
Yeah.
And you don't need to go anywhere for that. And the thing about the sweet part of it is that if you're both writers, 100%,
Yeah.
you're both struggling. So you need each other to
Yeah.
be like, okay, 1,000 words by Monday, November 15th.
Yeah.
See you there. You need each other. It's
Yeah.
even. And that's what I think for me, that makes all the difference. And anyone can do that. Anyone can
So
do that.
what now then? Like, I assume you're still you're doing some work as a journalist. You can correct me. Okay. But is there another book coming? I mean, have you got something else in the brew?
It's such an American question. Like I always wonder, like in Europe, are they like, okay, well, I know this came out 2 weeks ago, but like when's the next one coming out? Um, I know this is just what they have to. I don't have here's my job right now for myself. I am
Okay.
just trying to like get through this like next stage of not get through, but I'm trying to actually shockingly enjoy this part
Yeah.
of talking about the book and getting it out there and the whole book campaign thing. And then I'm seeing what's coming up because I'm
Mm.
really a columnist like by nature and I have a Substack
Yeah. I love
newsletter.
Substack.
Do you?
Oh
Okay,
yeah. I'm big
give
on
your list.
Substack.
Are you?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
so mine is called fittingly Take My Advice. I'm not using it
Love it.
because that actually is true.
Yeah.
But I do have really good advice in case you want some. But I'm seeing what evolves. And what I'm seeing is it's probably going to be a book, like a collection of essays that come out of the themes of this book of parenting and living with people with chronic or mental illness and women's stuff. I know for sure that my next book is going to grow out of this book, but I don't exactly know what the direction is.
Yeah.
Plus, I
Yeah.
need to find a new agent because my other agent who I love just left
Oh,
agenting.
that's
Many of them
happening.
are,
Yeah.
yeah, it's so sad because guess why? Turns out that's maybe even a worse job than writing because like it's
Yeah.
impossible to make money. So
I know. I know. The whole industry is like that right now, though. Like editors are, not by choice, and a lot of times, but like, editors are being let go from some of the big houses that have been there for like decades. You know,
it is. It's so
it's
crazy.
crazy.
It's so crazy. Well, I think like independent publishing for better and for worse have really kind of turned all that upside down, you know?
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
it's because anyone can publish a book if you have a
Right.
computer and you don't need an agent, you
Which,
don't need
yeah, it used to be said with a bit like you were being a little harsh on people when you phrased it that way. But now it's actually very empowering. I've been on both sides of the publishing fence. I had my traditional contract, and then I've most of my career has been as an indie author now, and
right.
I love it. And now I'm kind of what's been great about my career is I've seen a certain level of success as an indie author, which is now helping me kind of curb back and start looking at the traditional side again, but with a little
Interesting.
more leverage than I had before. So,
That's really good. And just FYI, I'm so grateful for my publisher, but
yeah,
there's a lot of my friends who've been publishing hybrid,
yeah,
that other track. And I mean, that's an amazing route. There's a
yeah,
ton of support. I mean, traditional publishing, such a crapshoot,
right,
and
right.
it's tough and you're kind of alone. I mean, it's very easy to think it's the like prize. And it's like everything.
It's
It's
just,
it's
yeah, it's a prize. It's the prize that comes with more work.
It does. And there's a
You,
lot of things you think you're going to get. And then you're like, oh,
yeah,
okay, that
yeah,
was just false out, and as good as they can be, it's just the industry's changed. The resources are different
right,
now.
right. Everything has changed. So,
Yeah.
well, we're at time, which is
Okay.
I always hate this part because it means that the conversation has to be wrapped up. But
Well,
uh,
I appreciated the opportunity, Kevin, and
oh no,
the
I'm really glad you're here. The book sounds amazing. I didn't have any opportunity to read it before our chat, to my great shame. But I've
yeah,
already
yeah,
ordered a copy, and
awesome.
I also just subscribed to you on Substack, so I'll be looking for your
So now,
advice.
oh no, so now I have to actually write it.
Yeah, you
Um,
have to keep up with it, and it has to be
yeah.
good. Yeah.
Okay, well,
So
I'm gonna look for your stuff too.
do
By
it.
the way, for the people who don't like reading, I just since it was so torturous to make it, I also have an audiobook, or the audiobook is available and I voiced it. It's on Audible and
Oh,
Spotify.
cool.
Yeah, it just came out. So
Oh, I
that was
wish
really
I had known that. I would have talked to you about that because that's so challenging. Everyone wants
it's
me to
fun.
do audiobooks, and I'm like, man, that's a lot of work. I
You
don't.
should though, because you have a great voice. You should do that, Kevin.
I should. Someone's
It's
gonna
fun.
finally talk me into it. It might as well be
It was
you.
really fun. It's really
Yeah.
much harder than you think it's gonna be,
Oh
but
yeah.
it was
Yeah.
fun.
Yeah.
I loved it. And I think a lot of people actually prefer to listen to it because it's just, it's a different experience. It's very immediate because it's like
Yeah.
as the I'm right there with you living
Yeah.
the story.
Yeah. Yeah. I love it as a concept.
Yeah.
Maybe you're the one. Maybe you're the one who's talked me
Okay.
into it.
Okay.
Tell everybody where they can. I'm going to put links to everything
Sure.
you related into the show notes, but where's the best place for people to find you in the book?
Okay. So on my website with my crazy name, but so look in the notes because nobody ever gets it right. It's juliefingers.com, and there you'll find there's info about the book, and plus that's all my articles, New York Times and Oprah and all that sort of stuff, which PS, just as inspiration, happened post 50. So
Yeah.
again, don't think your time is up. And yeah, kind of all the links and then like the book is Audible, Spotify, wherever books are sold, as they say.
Wherever fine books are sold. All
Yeah.
right. Well,
Not a beach read, by the way, but
well,
the fee
depends.
the fee this is not a beach read, but the feedback is it's worth it. And
This
it
is
is fun.
this is a cabin in the woods with a hand knit Afghan next to the fire reed.
Yeah. I mean, I have been told that people both are going back to therapy,
Yeah.
um, but also couldn't stop laughing,
Yeah.
but also are having a family meeting,
That
but
is the mark
also,
of an excellent memoir.
yeah,
That's why I'm excited to read it. I
thank
told
you.
you I'm a big fan of these things, so I'm sure I'm
Thank
going to
you.
be a Julie Fingersh fan as well. So,
Thank you. Well, I am a
all right.
Kevin fan. Thank you so much for having me. I
Oh,
really
of
appreciate
course. No, I appreciate you being. If you weren't here, it'd just be me talking by myself. So,
it, which would have
uh,
been super interesting too. I
it would
can
have been
feel.
interesting.
Yeah.
People stick around. All
Yeah.
right, everybody. Thank you, dear listener and viewer, for tuning in. Because without you, it's just two people randomly talking to each other. We might as well be strangers. But stick around. I'm gonna have my note at the end, and I'll see you on the other side. You know, I've always believed life's too short for boring stories. So I write the kind of books I'd want to read. Action-packed, fast-paced fiction. Adventure stories with characters you'll wish you could hang out with. And twists you'll never see coming. From ancient mysteries to modern-day thrills, my books take you on a wild ride. And trust me, I've got plenty of rides to choose from. So if you're ready to escape into a world of danger, discovery, and intrigue, it's here waiting. Find your adventure at kevintumlinson.com/books. Not responsible for sleepless nights. Well, you have made it. You have unlocked an achievement, which is to reach the note at the end. And every episode's got one. Everything I do has one. It's been an interesting sort of growth and experience. That whole thing, by the way, started years ago. Here's where it started. I actually was listening to an episode of the Self-Publishing Podcast with Johnny Truant and Sean Platt and David Wright. And they had a guest on, and I can't even remember who she was now. A particularly successful author, so successful that I can't currently remember who she was. But don't let that dissuade you. But she said something about how she has this mailing list, and at the back of in every book, she had, and forgive me, I'm gonna skew blue a little here, which I don't normally do on this show. But she had a section of the book called "Shit at the End of the Book," and so that may tell you who she is. I feel kind of ashamed that I can't remember, but I thought, wow, that's interesting. And the way she talked about it was that that was her readers' favorite bit. Like they would get to the end of the book, they couldn't wait to read that part. Sometimes they'd get mentions, so that was a big part of it. The readers would see their names in print, which is always fun for everybody. And I took that concept and I started writing my version of it, which I called Stuff at the End of the Book, because I like my books to be a little bit family friendly. So that's where that started. And then somewhere along the way, I decided, I'm going to grow this up a little, because I felt like it just wasn't the tone of what I was writing was becoming more mature in certain ways. I went from writing like sci-fi and fantasy stuff to writing thrillers, and I just felt like I needed to kind of change things just a little to accommodate that. And so it got rebranded as A Note at the End. And so since then, every single book I write has a note at the end. Remains to be seen whether the book I'm working on with J.D. Barker will have one, but maybe. Maybe. I'm gonna push for it because I think it's it's something fun you can do. It's effectively it's something that already exists. Really, it's an author's afterword, where the author talks about maybe the process of writing the book, the research that went into it, the people that they want to acknowledge, the ups and downs and life stresses and things that they had to deal with. So it's been a kind of cathartic, really, at the end of each book to kind of revisit some things and just sort of expand on it. And I always treated it as a friendly note, the same sort of thing. It's identical, actually, to the sort of thing that I write every week on my Substack, which, if you want to support me, by the way, my Substack is the best way to do that. I do have paid subscriptions if you want. They're voluntary. I've had quite a few people do that, and I'm very grateful for that. It helps a lot to have that revenue. But what's been interesting about that is I always include a note at the end at each of those posts. And then I was doing this thing for a while where I was posting. So every day I write my 3 things, like 3 pieces of wisdom. So I was sharing those for about a year. I shared those every day. And I would include a note at the end for those. And it just became kind of a sort of a tradition, something really useful for me in engaging with my my audience, my readers. So, I realized at one point that all this time I've been doing the same thing for this show, Wordslinger Podcast. So I have a note at the end of every episode. And I wasn't really calling it that until a couple of months ago, when it sort of dawned on me that that's what this was. So I started calling it that officially. It even gets like a little title screen that pops up. So, which if you're watching on YouTube, you've seen that. But it's an important thing. Here's why it's important for me, and why it might be important for you to consider something similar. But my note at the end, this is where, so like if you're reading one of my books, you just went through 300 some odd pages of adventure and action, drama, but it was all being dictated to you. There's a story being told to you, and you get to interact with when you're reading. That's the great part about reading versus watching television or listening to something on audio. There's a lot more interaction, a lot more audience participation, because as the reader, you actually have to construct the entire world in which you're dwelling for 300 pages. You have to dress the cast. You have to decide what they look like. You have to, you'll get maybe some description about this sort of thing from the author sometimes. But I learned a long time ago that it's better to not be overly descriptive about that stuff. There are some readers who just demand that. But for me, it turned out to be, it's a little bit like when Steven Spielberg talks about the shark in Jaws. It ended up being more terrifying because the audience had to imagine the shark, because it broke down, the mechanical shark broke, and it looked so fake, So it was much more terrifying to not see the shark. That's become sort of a rule of cinema, especially in the horror genres. Don't show the monster until you absolutely have to, and let the audience fill in the blanks, because the audience has an unlimited budget in their head, and they're going to create something you couldn't have created on screen. I think the same is true for writing. But at the end of the book, after this participation that we've both had in telling the story and crafting the world, that's where I step out onto the stage, and the curtain closes behind me, and the lights click on, and now I'm talking to you directly. It's not a story I'm telling you. It's an interaction. It's an engagement, as we would say in marketing. I'm a big fan of the sort of end note, the author's note at the end of each book. I like that. That's one of the things I like about, a lot of John Grisham's books have that, which I've always found fun. I've always looked forward to it. It's a little bit like once the fun of the story is finished, it feels reassuring to the reader that you're still there. You hung back, It'd be like at the end of a debut for a movie, the director and writers and cast come out and greet the audience and answer questions. It's a little bit like that. I feel like it's very important. I feel like it's actually one of the keys to success for me, is to have that. I think sometimes people don't notice they're there, or they skip it, and that's fine too. But the number of times that I've gotten reviews, for example, I'll get reviews on Amazon, and it's clear they read all the way through to the end and read that note at the end, because that's what they comment on in the review. Kevin, they'll say. They'll address me by my first name, or they'll say Mr. Tumlinson sometimes, but they'll address me directly in the review and say, if I wrote about maybe some of the anxiety I was suffering while I was writing this book, they will write to say, look, I hope things are better for you, or you don't have to worry about things, or I'm here, I am definitely reading, reassuring me. That's where that conversation becomes very two-way. Is that good for reviews? I couldn't say. I don't know if that's a good thing or not, but it's good for me. I like it. And I'll get emails. I'll frequently get emails to the point where I think I actually should, now that I think about it, I should put the little contact information right at the end of each of those in the books, how to email me. Because some people are clever enough, they just go find me online. There are other points there's some other stuff that's at the end of the book, like calls to action and things like that, where I do actually say that you could reach out to me, and I give a contact link. So I should just do that now that I think about it. But online it's a little easier, like Substack. When they read to the end of that, there's a button right there to leave a comment. And so I frequently get comments on those posts. It's just a good way. I don't know. It's good engagement. It's a good way for me to interact with people. I don't know what your story is right now. I don't know if you're an author or a creator. I don't know if maybe you're one of my readers who enjoys watching these podcasts. I kind of try to talk to everybody at the soul level. I'm trying to talk to you less as an audience and more as a friend that that I want to reassure you and, let you know that you can confide in me, and I want to be able to confide in you. So this information is useful to you, whether you write or not. That idea of once, if you're out there building anything, a book or a website or a YouTube channel, or you've built a small business, or you are in a large business, that bit at the end, once the transaction part of your relationship is done with a client or customer or reader, if you really want to land them as a fan, a true fan, stick around once the curtain closes. Come out on stage, not just to take a bow, but to engage with that audience. That's how you will create. They say you should aim to have 1,000 true fans. That's where they come from. You want 1,000 true fans? I talked about this today. We just recorded an episode of the Writers Inc. podcast, which, if you are an author, definitely tune in to Writers Inc. WritersIncPodcast.com. Links in the show notes. I talked about this whole concept of the 1,000 true fans, which I can't remember who the person who writes about that the most. Anyway, the idea is that if you want to succeed, if you can cultivate 1,000 true fans, you'll make plenty of money. You'll do pretty well as an author, or as any other kind of creator. And I kind of went on this discussion of everyone who gets into this business wants to go out and become world famous, internationally known, international bestseller. But if you just want to accelerate things a little, my recommendation would be, there's probably 1,000 people in your hometown. There's probably 1,000 people locally who could become your true fans. And their money spends the same as someone's money in Australia or Germany or whatever. Doesn't mean you can't reach a goal of international stardom in this kind of thing, but it's a lot easier when you know, I don't have to convince 1,000 people scattered around the globe. I just have to convince 1,000 people locally, and I'll be making my living and doing pretty well. So that's a place to start. No matter what your business is. Right now we tend to think globally, but locally is where you can concentrate your power a lot easier, because you can do in-person events. You can show up, like as a writer, I can show up and do local book signings. I can introduce myself at local bookstores, not just to the staff, but to the people in the store. I can go to events. There's farmers markets and things around here, for example, that I'm thinking about getting a booth and attending. But then, it also helps, like if you're going to do something like spend ad dollars on Facebook ads, for example, target those locally. Why not? Why spread that money around all over the globe where it loses some of its effectiveness, and just focus on finding 1,000 people in your hometown who become true fans and readers. That 1,000 people, they go out, and if they buy your books, now you've got money to expand your circle a little. That's what I'm trying to concentrate on. It's like my home address is a town north of Austin, so I'm trying to own that town in terms of being the writer here. When people think of books, I want them to think locally. I want them to think Kevin Tumlinson. I want them to go look up my books, ask Barnes and Noble to order them, that sort of thing. And then once I've cemented that, I'll go a little further. Let's go 20 miles out. Let's go 50 miles out, and own that. And then 50 miles from there. And pretty soon I'm talking to the state of Texas. And then next thing you know, I'm talking to Texas and Oklahoma and Louisiana and Arkansas and Colorado and all the neighboring states, the border states, and then the states after that, and then the whole U.S., and then Canada and Mexico, and then on and on and on. It's just an ever-expanding bubble. But you can fold success into more success. That's the idea. And the thing I said on the podcast today, because Jenna Brown said some things about how, she said in her line of work, there's something that's come up, a kind of concept that, you succeed at, or you fail at the same rate you succeed. Meaning that if you have a sudden spike in success, you're probably going to drop just as quickly as you rose, because spikes are unsustainable by their very nature. That's what a spike is, right? It's very rare that you have a spike and you just keep riding that for the rest of your career. So these sudden discoveries, these sudden success stories, they're not as sustainable as the long-term work. And the phrase I used was, you want to reach your heights by climbing the mountain, not by getting in a catapult. It's harder, takes longer, but once you get to the top of the mountain, you're up there. You can choose to go back down if you want, or you can choose to build a cabin. If you're flung up to those heights in a catapult, you're just going to come right back down. So unless you've worked out how to defeat gravity, which some people do, occasionally some people get flung up into the air and they realize, hey, I've got wings. I have a hot air balloon. I can stay up here. Those people are, they're a little more spread out, a little more rare, but they exist, and you could be one of them. So don't give up on trying to get that sudden discoverability. But while you're doing it, it's going to be easier if you're launching from somewhere up on the side of the mountain. Not as high to go, not as much work to put into it, but you might be able to reach those sustained heights. So, anyway, that's going to wrap us up for this episode of the Wordslinger podcast. I hope you enjoyed the interview with Julie, and I hope you got a little something out of the note at the end here. We got the Christmas holiday coming up. As of today, I'm recording this on December 12th, so there's another about 2 weeks to Christmas. Hard to believe, man. Almost at the end of the year. It's just hard to believe that the year's gone by that quick. Lots of things going on in Kevin land. If you are a praying person, this is something I don't do often, but there's some challenges happening for me and Kara. Nothing too major, but we could use some prayer. So if you're up for it, and thank you. And if there's something I can pray for you, man, let me know. You can go over if you go to kevintumlinson.com, you can click the contact button. You can send me an email anytime you like. Always there. And anyway, I do pray for you. I hope everything's going great. But otherwise, I'm going to wrap this up. I hope you have a wonderful week, a wonderful weekend ahead. I'm really happy you're here. Thank you for supporting me, and being just a great part of my life. Frankly, I really appreciate that. So, make sure that you like, share, and subscribe. If you're on YouTube, click the little bell notification thing so that you can be notified when new episodes go live. Leave a comment if you don't mind. Comments tell YouTube that we are engaged with each other, and so that's helpful. Just let me know what you got on your mind, and I appreciate you being here. So otherwise, thanks for dropping in. Tune in again next time, and I'll see you there.